Real quick, before I start talking about the movie, I want to introduce myself. Hi, my name's Damien, or as this channel is going to be called, Ad-Lib Reviews. Little background about me. I've loved movies my whole life. Ever since I was a kid, as long as I can remember, I've loved going to the theaters. I've loved watching movies. I've loved just quoting them at whatever time, whether it fits the mood or not. It's just something that I've always done, right? So like I've always loved them, and I love talking about them. And so what I want to do with this channel is I just want to talk about movies. And I know reviews is in the name, but it's not necessarily going to be reviews. It's going to be more like just like rants and my thoughts about movies that I guess could come out in a review like thing, but I figure just ad lib reviews. It sounds nice. And so one thing about me with movies is I really like characters and themes, and that's what I tend to focus on. And so that's part of why I also wanted to do this YouTube channel, is because a lot of my friends, family, coworkers in my life, I can talk to them about movies, but it feels like typically the conversation is like really kind of surface level. It doesn't get too far in. Like I'll start talking about the themes of something, and then whoever I'm talking to, they'll just be like, yeah, right on. And so I figured this would be a really good way to just express my thoughts with movies. And with that, let's go ahead and talk about 28 Years Later. So 28 Years Later is the new sequel to 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later. And, these movies came out, especially 28 Days Later, early 2000, 2002, I think. And I had never really seen any of them. I knew about them. Specifically 28 Days Later, I kind of forgot there was a 28 Weeks Later. And I guess that's like the normal thing, because it seems like nobody really talks about that, and a lot of people disregard that. And at the beginning of 28 Years Later, you get like little text prompts. And I guess this movie is also saying, hey, just forget about that one. So before going and watching this movie, I did watch 28 Days Later just to like familiarize myself with the franchise, just so I don't feel like I'm going in too blind. And 28 Days Later, it was cool. It was cool. I liked what they were doing with that movie. I liked what it was about and the messaging that it had in there. And so as I was going into this one, I was wondering, what more could they do with this premise, right? With this idea of just this whole island of people just being consumed with literal rage. Because I feel like they tackled pretty much everything in the first movie. And so I just wasn't sure what they were gonna do. But I just want to say right off the bat, they knocked it out of the park, in my opinion. In my opinion, this is a beautiful movie. I loved it, right? I've already seen a few people talk about it online, and so I know some people kind of have mixed reactions here and there. Me personally, I really liked it, especially because of the themes. But we'll get into that later. First, I want to just talk about who all's in this movie, just the main people that, that this focuses on, which is Spike, Jamie, Kelson, and Isla. Spike, he's played by Alfie. Forgot his last name. Jamie, the father, he's played by Aaron Taylor Johnson. The mother, Isla, she's played by Jodie Comer. And Kelson, he's a character that we see in like the second half of the movie. He's played by Ralph Fiennes. Everybody in this movie showed up and did their job. They did it all well, especially Alfie, who plays Spike, and Jodie Comer. I feel like they were the real like emotional anchors of this movie, especially Alfie, because as you watch the trailers, you might think it's an Aaron Taylor Johnson movie and his sidekick son, when really it's primarily about Alfie, right? So the whole premise of this movie is that there's this secluded island in the sea off of the coast of the UK. And there's a community that lives there now. And it's a small community. They all take care of each other, watch each other's back, share resources. But of course, to get a lot of these things, you have to go onto the mainland. And so there is a tradition that they have where whenever boys come of age, I don't know if it's boys and girls, but whenever boys come of age, they go into the mainland to get their first kill with any of the infected there. And so that's how this movie starts off. And it starts off with Jamie getting Spike ready, going to take him to get his first kill. And we see a little bit of moments with his mother and before that, and she's not doing too well. And so it starts off what seems like a survival type of movie, right? But I'd say that's only about like half of the movie, and the survival part of it is I think it's done well. You do feel some of the tension, but you do also get to see how kind of nature has come back. There's a lot of shots that really show off the terrain of the area. And so the first half of this movie has this mix of suspense and horror, but as well as like peace in certain parts. And it's really cool. It's really cool. And so, chaos ensues, and you get to a point where it's like, man, how are they going to make it out of this? How are they going to get out? Needless to say, they get back. And that's where this movie really starts, because it's after they come back from their first hunt. That's when everything really kicks in. And you start to see that this movie, instead of being about just survival, because it is about that, it's also about accepting loss and the pain that comes with that and the process that is. And I think it captured it so well. I think if you've ever lost a loved one recently and you have memories of it, I think this movie's going to hit really hard for you, especially towards the end, which I'll get into that. That is going to be spoilers, but I'll let y'all know. But yeah, it's just a very, very human movie, and it's very character focused as well. The second half of the movie is about Spike and his mom, Isla, and it's just beautiful. I would recommend to go watch it. I don't know how much longer it's going to be in the theaters. They be pulling movies out after about like a month or two. So, if you have the time, I recommend you go watch it. I'd say go watch it in something that has a good sound too, like Adobe would be really, really good. And so now for spoilers. So the second half of this movie, right? Spike, his mom, Isla, she's been sick throughout the whole thing. And you're not really sure what's going on with her, because it has been 28 years later. So you don't know if she's just ill with any type of brain disease, anything like that, or if maybe this infection has evolved and maybe now there's like a new strain of it that has made its way onto the island, and she's the first infected, right? But like I said, spoilers, she's not infected. Turns out she is sick, and Spike, he's so desperate to save her that once he finds out that there is a doctor on the mainland, he decides to take his mom out there to save her. Now, it is very naive, because you just dragging her out there when she's not doing well, she's not in her right mind. That's a recipe for disaster. But I think that's part of what I was talking about this movie with accepting loss, how it's like a process, right? Because Alfie, he is 12 in this movie. He is a child, so he is very naive on what could actually be done for his mom, because the island, the community that they're in, there are no doctors. So anyways, he gets his mom, right, sneaks her off the island and goes searching for Dr. Kelson to help her, right? And throughout this trip, we get to see what the relationship with him and his mother is like. And it's very loving and sincere and heartfelt. And with her, he gets to act like a child. There's a scene where she's just goofing off with him, and she asks him, is your dad ever goofy? And he's like, oh no, not really. Which goes to highlight, I think, how a lot of people accept loss differently, right? Alfie, as being a kid that he is very naive. He thinks that everything, well, not everything, he thinks that it could be fixed and that it's a simple fix and that medicine could do it. Whereas you compare that to his dad, Jamie already knows what's going to happen, but being the man that he is, instead of being there with his wife in her last moments and just like really loving her, giving her all the love she needs until her last breath, he goes about it in a very he handles this future loss in a very toxic way, right? Like he instead wants to go out into the mainland and hunt and just revel in violence, and he wants his son to do the same as well. You see it all throughout the first half of the movie whenever he's taking them out to the mainland, right? Whenever they get back, instead of again spending time with his wife, he wants to just enjoy this party and just enjoy debauchery. And it's to the point where Alfie sees this man cheating on his mom, this dude is cheating on his dying wife. You couldn't like I said, you couldn't spend these last moments with her, and then after she's gone, then find connection somewhere else. And so seeing Alfie's relationship with his mom, it means so much, and you understand why he's so desperate to save her, because she is the joy in his life, and vice versa, right? And so that's the second half of this movie. You do come across another character, and he's there to add to the world and how everything works, and he is a little bit of comic relief, right? But it's when we get to the end of the movie, right, whenever Alfie and Isla finally do come across Dr. Kelson, this is where the movie gets really good to me, because this is where Alfie finally has to go through like the full process of grief, being naive, being in denial, to finally having to accept it, right? Kelson, when we meet him, it turns out he's not some scary freak that everyone in the village is afraid of. He's actually a very, very sincere, thoughtful, heartfelt man who, despite all the chaos around him, finds the joy in life and have lived. And so all those shots you see in the movie of just these towers of bones and skulls, it looks all horrific, right? Once you see him as a character and the way he talks about the dead, it kind of recontextualizes all that. And instead of it being eerie, it's actually kind of beautiful in a way, right? And so in these last moments, Kelson kind of acts as a guide for Alfie and his mom to, come to this conclusion together, and for Alfie to finally, accept her death. And it ends with this scene where it's happening at night, and the fires around them, they use the cinematography to kind of display overlap the fire with like an overhead shot, and it looks like it's spirits dancing throughout this whole site that Kelson has set up. And essentially there's this burial scene where Alfie has with his mom that is just beautiful, and I think like I said, if you've ever lost anybody in your life, I think this scene will hit hard. I'll say for me, right, the conversation that Alfie had with his mom was like damn near 1-for-1 with my grandma, right? Because she had died of cancer. My grandma had died of cancer. And so, I did have the opportunity before my grandma died, knowing that she was dying, to tell her I love her one last time and her say it back. And that means so much. And so I think if you've ever experienced something like that, or even if you did miss a chance, I think this movie is really going to hit you in your feels. And yeah, like I said, I would recommend you go watch it. 10 out of 10.